Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Max Boykin. I'm the manager of the Save HIV funding campaign, and welcome to our second installment of our second part of our training series. This is our civic engagement part two. This training will be focused, and you'll have wonderful, wonderful panelists. This training is focused on candidate engagement. We just had a series of primaries that happened yesterday with some wonderful outcomes in certain spaces and different outcomes in others. And we understand that as we get closer to this November elections, different folks will be engaging candidates, currently elected officials, and even different folks that have engagement both on a state level, including the federal level. We will be focusing on federal level of engagement with while being in district. Most of you live in your areas. We're not talking to candidates while they're in DC. We're talking about while they're in the district, stomping, knocking doors, also having town halls. Those are the things that we will be focused upon for this training today. We have three amazing panelists who have done and are very connected to all the work that Save HIV funding campaign is working on to make these happen. We also have a civic engagement part one that is up on our website, along with our entire training series from last year and our digital training from earlier this year. We invite everyone to take a chance to look at those recordings, send those out to your network to give folks a full understanding of ways in which we're doing this work. The first civic engagement training was focused more on in district level engagement with those that are already elected officials. Also understanding some of the different ways of advocacy that we've done, from the phone zaps to the different phone banks, and other types of direct level engagement that we've done with in district level engagement with legislators. What we are going to talk about a little bit more here is to talk about the differences between engaging in C3 versus like C4 work. And we all understand that civic engagement means working to make a positive difference in the public life of a community. It combines different skills, values, and motivations. And when we're also thinking about civic engagement, we're also thinking about ways in which people can take action. And take action in a broad sense of the word, from voting to having and setting up in district meetings with their legislators, to also for certain folks and in certain spaces, especially if you're in more of a C4 or individual level, campaigning for certain individuals. So we also understand for individuals looking to make an impact, exploring what civic engagement is and important to promoting actually public health. And you'll see in a lot of the different public health spaces, civic engagement is important, especially when we're talking about taking things to the political determinants of health, which was made famous by Dr. Dawes at Morehouse School of Medicine. But without further ado, I want to pass it to someone who has worked even longer in these spaces and understanding how in which folks can do different levels of engagement from C3, C4, and including work on the individual level. I actually did this training with him years ago while I was still at AIDS Foundation of Chicago. So I was excited to bring us back and see what new things that we have learned and changed since then. And uh, a wonderful advocate who is recently transitioned to leading work at True Evolution. Without further ado, I want to introduce Matthew Rose.
Y'all, I pay him to say these nice things about me, and it works every time because I get a nice ego boost every time he has to say them. So thank you, Max. Um, I think this is always an important conversation, and I think that what it comes down to is that most of us want to be engaged, but it's figuring out what lane you are in, how you are functioning in that lane, and what you can do in your space. There's a lot you can do without getting yourselves in trouble. But it is really important to know what you can and cannot do, especially in this election year, when there will be heightened scrutiny on what's happening in elections. There are going to be people trying to do whole new levels of effery. Now, see, I didn't swear for once. Than we've seen before. We just have to be on our toes. We all saw earlier this year when the administration tried to go after and then still in court with the Southern Law Poverty Center. Wow, can't speak today. So it's important that if we're in a C3 space, we know what we can be doing as a C3. If we're one of those few organizations that has a C4, understanding how we can use that C4, and as individuals, how to differentiate when we're doing stuff as an individual versus when we're just doing stuff because, we with people. So, first things first. I want you to think of it as kind of the cardinal rule from the C3 space, since that's where most people are engaging from. C3 space, think about issues. Your job is to keep talking about issues. Even in election year, you are still allowed to talk about your issues. When it becomes C4 is when you start talking about individual candidates and individual ballot measures. Now, you can still engage with ballot measures and you can still engage with candidates, but there are some rules around those. But let's talk C3. You can do voter education. Every single one of your organizations in a C3 space can do nonpartisan voter education. You can tell people how to register to vote and how to make sure they are and know where they're going to vote, how to make voter plans. You can have all of those discussions. Now, some of you have weird state laws that you might have to check on. I'm looking at you side-eyed, those living in Georgia and some of the other southern states sometimes. But for the most part, every C3 organization is allowed to register people to vote. Second, all C3 organizations, you are able to host nonpartisan voter education forums. This means you have to invite every eligible candidate. If there's a Green Party candidate, they in. If there's a constitutional conservative candidate, they in. Sometimes you might not want to do this because you might be worried about what some crazy in your race might say. If that's the worry, don't invite them, don't have the forum. But if you're going to do it, it has to be open and accessible to all. In that forum, you have to commit to asking neutral questions of everyone. So you can ask about the issue area that matters to you. You can ask every candidate where they stand on ending the HIV epidemic, where they stand on getting rid of ADAP waiting lines and restrictions in their states. Those are totally fine to do. What you cannot say is, would you have voted for the Democratic proposal to restore the premium tax credits? That, not so good. But as long as it's neutral questions and open to all candidates and you ask everyone, you're good. You can, as a C3, publish. Now, this is a tricky one. You can publish a legislative scorecard using objective criteria. This takes a lot of work because you have to be able to find all the positions of all the candidates. You have to send it out to all the candidates. You have to give them all equal time to apply. I worked on a campaign back in when we elected Biden to get all the, as a C3, to get all the candidates, and we had to talk to all the Republicans, and actually even got some Republican sponsors about doubling funding for global health to end the epidemics of HIV, TB, and malaria, and to deal with future epidemics that would be exacerbated by climate change. Huge coalition effort, over 70 organizations involved. We had to go to every candidate. That includes, I had to have a record of every Republican that I attempted outreach with, and records of every Democratic campaign I met with, what I said to them, how I said it to them. But you can develop this information about them. You can also develop fact sheets on policy proposals. So if a candidate has a policy proposal, you can say what a yes vote would do, what a no vote would do. You can do the same thing with ballot initiatives. So you can say what the outcomes for your community would be based off of your expertise. Now, try to use as neutral language as possible when doing this, saying this would throw thousands of people off of Medicaid. Medicaid is a prime funder for HIV. That is a neutral statement that you can say. What you should not say is these crazy people think that work requirements are going to solve all of our problems and they just want to kick people off their health care. That, not so neutral, but I think you get the point. Also, you can promote early voting. You can promote and provide transportation to the polls to everyone. You just have to make sure you're offering it to everyone and not trying to say, I'm offering it to only people I think are going to go Democrats. You can say, we've identified these individuals who care about HIV. We're going to make sure everyone who cares about HIV has a ride to the polls. You do not ask them their partisan preference. You can't ask them how they vote, they intend to vote. You can just say, we are going to give rides to the polls to those pigs who say that HIV is their top issue. All right. I think we covered it. Did we cover everything? We covered legislation, ballot initiatives. You can say on a ballot initiative, it's just what a yes vote would do versus what a no vote would do on your ballot initiative. If you have a C4, you can be a lot more direct. You can actively endorse candidates. You can oppose candidates. If you have a super PAC, you can run ads against candidates and not coordinate with the campaigns. This is a whole other different legal structure. As an individual, so making sure you're an individual because you have free speech rights as an individual. You need to first delineate when you are speaking as yourself as an individual and doing work as an individual and not attached to your organization. You want to be very clear about when you are doing that. And that line sometimes gets blurred because some of us are spokespeople for our organizations. And so we have to take a higher duty when thinking about what we're saying. But as an individual, you are allowed to vote. You're allowed to vote, voice your opinion for a candidate. You're allowed to support a candidate. You can throw a fundraiser for them, but you have to just make it clear that you're doing it in your individual capacity. All right. I think that is everything I needed to cover, Max. Is there anything else you wanted me to cover?
Thank you so very much for that, Matt. One follow-up question for you is if an organization does have an access to both C3 and C4 services, um, what are there times, I know there are times, what times are there really important for folks to make that delineation between C3 voter education work versus C4 more
So you should always be tracking that, what who's doing what and how that's delineating. You As you get closer to the election, especially because one of the remember the main difference on the C4 side is that you are engaging in electioneering, which means you're engaging in efforts to actively influence the results of the election that are not just turning out people for the election. You're always good in C3 land if you're just turning people out for the election because turnout is turnout is turnout. Voter education is education is education. As long as you are nonpartisan in your education, but it is rightful to say that certain parties have cut all the HIV funding in their bill every year versus other parties who have not proposed a plan that have done that. They have opposed those cuts. Those are just general statements. So you have that. The C4 side is really trying to think about it if you're endorsing a particular candidate, if you want a particular candidate to vote certain ways, and if you want to raise money for those candidates.
Thank you so very much for that, Matt. And one more follow-up from Michael. If a 501(c)(3) organization is incorporated in New York, but has remote staff in Georgia, do employees follow New York laws or Georgia laws?
You have so it depends on what election activities you're engaging in. You technically have to do both because the state law governs around elections because our elections are while we have a national federal election, that's not actually how our elections really work. Our elections are all governed by it's the federal law you have to check against and then check against state law. So you would have to do both.
And just to add to that piece, and to the, to the answer of that question, Michael, is say for us in Georgia, we need to follow Georgia state
Yeah.
laws, of course, around any of the engagement around the campaigns and or also around registering people to vote. And as Matt also alluded to, one of the like Georgia is one of those states where you do have special considerations around registering to vote. One of the ways that we get around that, and this is they have a lot of strict rules around who can register people to vote and who can like send physical copies of voter registration forms into offices. Ways to get around that is to have folks register on a tablet or online if if you have access to getting people online. I do not suggest people registering on phones person giving a lot of personal contact on a personal phone. I don't think is the best way to do it, but a tablet or something else is, I think, much more, especially if an organizational tablet works a lot, works very well. Oh, we're Owen, thank you for coming from Zambia. Welcome.
Yeah. And I do warn Georgia's a great example. So in Georgia, you can't give water to people in line. And even if you're a New York organization that's functioning to do work in Georgia, you still can't give water to people in line, even though New York law says that's fine.
Thank you for that. And yes, we have some very interesting rules, Jesse, just so you uh for us here in Georgia around
And
elect.
the other thing I'll say to everyone, there are, as we get closer to an election, there are a number of organizations who stand up to do election law work and election support work. Call them. If you are ever in question of what's happening or what you're doing, call an election lawyer. There are a lot of nonprofit pro bono lawyers out there to help with this. Alliance for Justice is a great place to go, and I'll figure out a way to drop them in the chat.
Dope. Thank you so very much for that, Matt. We will have time for more questions, but I also want to talk about some of the ways in which people actually engage with our candidates. And because we're coming out, not everyone's done with their primaries. Some folks are still dealing with their and still connecting with their primaries, but there's still candidates to engage with throughout this time, and we want to make sure that we're able to continue to build and grow with them. And I want to uplift one of my bosses, Jeremiah Johnson, the executive director of Prep for All, who worked with a number of folks on our team to actually put together an absolutely wonderful candidate forum in New York. And I'm going to pass it on over to Jeremiah, I think. I saw him go off video. um, but to pass it on over to Jeremiah, who led around this wonderful candidate
Yeah,
forum
can you
around prep access. Yes, we
hear
can.
me?
Yes, we can. Jeremiah.
Max,
Yes,
riff for just 2 minutes while I figure out my computer. Apologies, everybody.
no problem. So, one of the things to think about as folks are engaging with candidates is important to think about the time around it. As folks are continuously engaging around different elections, they are doing multitude of events. One of the things to also think about, and some of the folks on this call that I've known have done, is attending some of the events that they already have. If this is an election event, you are most likely going as an individual. Not necessarily representing your organization unless your organization has a separate like C4 particular piece to go to an election specific candidate getting, candidate event. It's different if they're just going to a general like getting out the vote, getting people to go vote. That is a different space than say going to a particular candidate event where they are one asking for donations, asking for people to volunteer for their campaigns. Those are different spaces, but you can use that space as an individual to ask important questions of candidates. I've seen this many times, especially when candidates do like little bar runs or smaller town halls. These are all spaces for folks to be able to think about how to further conversations with candidates, and that think about when you're moving with the candidates, it's not just a one-time thing. It is something that you're actually engaging with them on multiple levels. And without further ado, to talk more about that and the ways that they've been doing that, especially in New York, which have had some spicy elections coming up of recent. I will pass it on over to the executive director of Prep for All, Jeremiah Johnson.
Thank you so much, Max. And apologies for some of the technical issues. I am working remotely from Puerto Vallarta this month and still navigating some of the Wi-Fi issues down here. As Max said, I am the executive director at Prep for All, also a co-founder of the Save HIV funding campaign, and just really grateful to have so many people here talking with us about this important topic, particularly as we are headed into some really important months for candidate engagement. And many thanks to Matt as always for have such highly skilled and technical knowledge on these sorts of topics. I'm really here to just give a little bit of show and tell as someone who wouldn't consider myself an expert on C3, C4, but really perhaps more of a lived experience of what we did this year. Because I'm not a lawyer. I run an organization, so I am always mindful about things related to lobbying and how we do all of that. But there is a certain level of navigating the uncertainties because these things can get complex. They change a lot. And what I could say is that there are a couple of things, over the past year in particular that have really guided me. One, I don't want to preemptively censor myself as an advocate or as an organization, or presume that I have to be more quiet on issues than I have to. And that's something that really came through, I think, in what you said, Matt. And this is something that some of our great policy advocates are doing right now in this space is we're getting a lot thrown at us on about a lot of policies. Don't preemptively comply with something that goes beyond exactly what is written. And for me, that is also part of this conversation. As you just heard Matt say, there is a lot that we can do, even as 501(c)(3) organizations, in order to elevate our issues and to build relationships with candidates. The second thing is I am not shy, as Matt said, about consulting experts before moving forward. So, I'm not going to back away from doing something. The way that I move forward with confidence is that I'm going to talk to experts to ensure that I am dotting my I's and crossing my T's, while recognizing that, I don't want to come from a place of fear. It's check with the experts and move forward. So the way that that has looked for us this year is there have been a number of interesting races related to New York. One that we decided to tune into specifically was the New York 12 race. The 12th congressional district right now in New York is represented by Jerry Nadler. He has been a longtime champion for HIV related issues. He's represented a district in Manhattan where HIV has historically been of great importance to community. This is part of the origins of a lot of great HIV/AIDS activism. And so it's an area where we want to make sure that whoever represents us going forward understands that history and understands it from the vantage point of a champion, not just another issue. This is something that we really hope that they will inherit. It was a very crowded race on the Democratic side. And you may have heard a little bit about it. Jack Schlossberg, who is in the Kennedy family, was one of the people to run. There were a number of high profile individuals, a lot of money put into the Democratic primary side of this race. And so Prep for All is actually located in this district. I live personally in this district. And so we wanted to use the opportunity to elevate HIV as an issue in general. Um, the way that we went about it, and this may be something that works specifically for you, or it might be something, unique to us. Happy to talk with people more about this and share ideas and some of the resources we put together around this. But we've actually had a long-stand great working relationship with New York University, or NYU here. We have worked with a legal clinic there actually for several years at this point. And so we actually reached out to them to co-host this town hall that we proposed for back in May, prior to the primary, in order to co-host this and have this conversation together. This was something that allowed me to feel even more confident in moving this forward. And thank you to either Michael or Max who just put that into the chat. You could actually listen to the video yourselves. But being able to work with another partner on this, it might just be also, if you're a smaller entity, working with another larger entity that has more resources, more ability to help out. There's a strength in numbers sort of component that made us feel even more confident that in case something got dicey, in case something got complicated, we would feel, like we had enough hands on deck to basically handle it. Working with the law school at NYU certainly added an additional layer of what felt like protection as we sort of moved through this kind of an action that, it was new for us. We ended up doing all of the things that Matt talked about. We came up with an invite that we sent out to all candidates in the race. I will say that that took a bit of time for us to do the research on who all is in the race, how to get a hold of their campaigns, and go ahead and invite folks in. We had conversations about how we would handle if it was just candidates who are supportive of our issue, or if we had people who might actually show up, and there could be some sort of conflicting messaging. How would we handle that? Ultimately, what ended up happening for us is it was only Democratic candidates who signed up to show up. We ended up with 8 people signed up, 7 actually showed up. in this very crowded race. And that was how we went about getting people there. Went very smoothly, and people were very eager to engage with us. This was another thing that was a bit of a learning opportunity for me. I didn't know, these are folks who are doing a lot of campaigning. They have a lot of activities to involve in. They're trying to be strategic. Some of them have a lot of competition for their time. We found that the majority of the campaigns were very eager, at least on the Democratic side, were very easy to access, very eager to engage with us. And so we very quickly had a number of people who were ready to show up. From there, once we had it sort of secured, we knew where people are going to be. We hired some video folks to be there because we wanted to really capture, the responses that they gave. Because we knew it was going to be a little bit difficult to get community to show up in person. So we wanted to make sure that we captured these statements, these comments for afterwards so that we could post it online and use it in clips. We worked on a script. So normally I'm more of an off the cuff sort of speaker, and I was facilitating the forum. This was a case where we really wanted to script it a little bit more. And so we had a full run of show. We had some specific pieces in it that designated that this was a nonpartisan event, that this was not a campaign event. We asked all of the candidates to treat this as an issues-based forum, exactly what Matt was talking about. This is about HIV and PrEP. This is not a debate or a political rally or, an opportunity campaign. So that was a slightly different item for us in terms of how we handled it. The day of, we got there. We hosted it as a conversation the way that we normally would. I took good care as a facilitator to make sure that everyone got a chance to speak so that there wasn't any sort of perceived preference in terms of any particular candidate. And it ended up being a really great conversation. I did have to sort of lightly remind the candidates at one point that it was not a campaign event. So I would say just be prepared for that if you're facilitating, because sometimes their instincts just sort of kick in, I think. But ultimately, it went very smoothly. We got a lot of great videos out of it. Another thing that came out of it was even for some of the candidates who weren't able to make it, they sent statements that we were able to read while we were there. Ultimately, the person who won the Democratic primary wasn't even one of the ones who showed up, Michael Lasher. But because we held this forum and had engaged with his campaign, once he won, we were able to reach back out to him and schedule a meeting to talk to him about these issues. And he was happy to meet with us directly because we had already shown this level of engagement beforehand. And so that was another positive development. And again, at this point, we've reached out to every single person in the race. So we're not being, accused of showing any sort of preference or anything. This was just good follow-up with the Lasher campaign. Some other benefits that came out of this, just to name a few. One, we were sort of encouraged by the comments from a lot of the candidates who themselves enjoyed this opportunity because it turned out no one had really done this kind of an issue-based forum where everyone was invited. And so we actually got a lot of comments from the candidates saying, we never get to meet each other, actually, because a lot of times what people are getting invited to, it's more of an electoral, C4 sort of engagement with just inviting the top candidates. This was an opportunity. And I will just say, there were some candidates in the race who, were not getting a lot of that same attention that some of the more well-financed individuals were. And it was really interesting to see them show up and have these talking points. And I think opened up our issue to their base and was really positive in terms of that. Second thing I would say is exactly what Max just put into the chat. One of the top contenders in the race, the clip that we had for him when we posted it on social media, it I don't know what qualifies for viral, but it certainly got well over 100,000 views because we tapped in to his base. And so we had a lot of benefit from that as well. A lot of new follows on social media because of it. There was a lot that we got out of this. We certainly made a lot of progress within this particular district. And for me, I think it's certainly proof that this is a good opportunity for a lot of advocates to consider, perhaps in other jurisdictions, depending on sort of the contours of your own electoral environment. So I'll pause there and pass it back over to Max, but hopefully that's useful. And of course, I'll put my email in the chat because if you do want to see samples of some of the things that we sent out, happy to share that one-on-one. Don't want to put them out there broadly for everyone because they're not sort of packaged for broad distribution. But if you want an example of what we sent out to candidates, happy to share that with you. Back to you, Max.
Thank you so very much, Jeremiah, for that breakdown of from the beginning to end of what it meant to create the candidate forum, also the follow-up that you've been able to have with candidates both on the ones that won, but also like there's follow up that we have with candidates that necessarily didn't win that are also more engaged with the work of Prep for All and Save HIV funding that are more understanding and bringing up these important issues, and that is one of the goals of being able to have this, while also of course engaging with those that are potentially winning or getting into these spaces as candidates to lawmakers eventually. And we also understand that many folks, the primaries are getting closer to the end, so there's less people that you have to potentially invite or send invites to, though. So that's also a potential positive as you are looking to do forums or other this year. Um, so given time, we are yes, and getting involved more with this is absolutely wonderful. With that, and we will have time for questions at the end. Without further ado, I definitely want to make sure and that we have plenty of time and space to uplift the wonderful work of Positive Women's Network, who last month that we celebrated their 18th birthday. Whoop, whoop, and we want to continue to uplift that. But they have also relaunched their PWN Votes resource hub, and they are doing some amazing work on the ground throughout the country in multiple states to be able to make sure that we're able to see changes in our elected representatives and making sure that they're not just being educated, but also our folks are getting out to vote. So without further ado, I want to, for the organizing director for Positive Women's Network, someone who also is doing amazing work with the Texas Strike Force, and doing that tough work. I want to pass it on over to the Crystal Townsend.
Thank you, Max. And hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I just wanted to come on and share a few resources. Like Max said, my name is Crystal. I use she, her pronouns. And I am a part of Positive Women's Network. We are the only national membership organization led by and for women, trans and cisgender, gender diverse folks, and transgender people living with HIV in the United States. And in 2016, we launched PWN Votes because at the time, our members were very clear that our elected officials ultimately represent us, they work for us, and the HIV community is a powerful voting bloc. And with over 1 million people living with HIV in the country, we have a lot of power and we have shifted things in this country before. So, what we've noticed is people need the how-tos on how to do this, how to engage, how to talk with legislators, how to knock some of the fear out of it, and really like make sure our people, the people who look like us, are being reached when campaigns and organizations overlook us. And so I'm gonna drop a few resources here. One is our PWN Votes Resource Hub. This is a really great resource that outlines the key issues. It outlines our toolkit. And if you click on our toolkit, you will see things like what are the issues? How do I register to vote? Um, why is it important to vote at this point in time? So you'll see things like that. This is a toolkit that you can share with your cousins, your aunties, your friends. And I can't tell you how many times we talk to people. I know in my own life, uh a week or two before the election day trying to figure out how do I do a mail-in ballot. So all of these things come up all the time. Um Click the toolkit, use the toolkit, share it. There's also a host of trainings we've been hosting, and we have been trying to complement what Save HIV funding is doing because there's a lot of information out. Last week we did a training on a 501c3 and 501c4, highlighting what we do in the field and some ways that people have tried to really throw us off and compromise our C3. So that does happen. People, not everyone wants you to be as powerful as we are. So they will try to throw you off and get you outside of the C3 guidelines, but we're all clear on what we can do and what we can't do. And so this training kind of highlights that. Um, Last thing I want to share is there will be we have a few other trainings coming up that will walk you through the toolkit so that by September, you have a voting plan. You know what to do. And finally, one thing that we are clear about is we still hold a lot of power. Our elected officials work for us, and voting is a tool. It is not the only tool. It will not save us fully, but it is a tool that we all can use. And so, I know some of you might work for your own 501c3 organization or a clinic, or a lot of organizations are really afraid of what they can and cannot say during this time, especially. And there is a lot that you can do. You can talk to your elected officials. They should know the issues that you are experiencing. There is a lot that you can do. So please visit us online, check out the toolkit, check out the trainings. And then last thing, don't do this alone because you don't have to. You have organizations like Save HIV Funding, PWN. Find you a political home, find you your people where you can go and ask these questions. So I'll just pause and I'm happy to share more about what we're doing on the ground in places like North Philly and North Houston. And we've done things in Denver as well, door knocking to talk to people. I'm happy to share more about that, but I want to also make sure we leave time for your questions. So Max, I will pass it to you.
Thank you so very much, Crystal, and thank you for that breakdown of both the resource hub, some of the, highlighted a couple of places that you're working on across the country. I would love for folks to hear more, and I brought this up in a couple places around the canvassing efforts and how in which what has been some of the like the most powerful pieces that y'all get out of that, and also what are some of the ways in which y'all set that up in the local areas that y'all are engaging.
Yeah, sure. So we, over the last 3 years, especially a little bit longer than that, we have done door-to-door canvassing in North Philly, in the Denver area, and we just launched in North Houston. One of the reasons that we have started door-to-door canvassing is because Um, you all probably get these messages or phone calls around elections, just like I do, from random people that we don't know, and we don't see them after the election is over. What is most impactful is when people have a human that they talk to. So someone that they talk to face. That is the most effective way and important way to build a relationship with someone. So in North Philly and North Houston, we have been talking with our neighbors. because of this very reason. We want to build relationships and really understand the things that they care about beyond an election. And so the way that we set this up is, when I hear that question, how do we set it up? Um, there's a lot that goes into it, but I think what you're asking is like, how do we know where to go? And how do we know what to say to people? We know where to go because we live in the places where we go. We know that from a scan of the area, we know where Black and Brown people are. We know who is reaching them, what we call low propensity voters, or voters who are less likely to be engaged, especially during an election. So this is how we know where to go. We also know the issues impacting our people. For example, in Houston, North Houston is a congressional district that didn't have representation for over a year. And when we talked to folks on the phones, because we had been phone banking in the area for the last 3 years at least. And this last year, when we talked to people on the phone, they didn't even know that they didn't have representation. They didn't even know that their Representative Sylvester Turner had passed away. So people were experiencing things like the passing of HR 1, the threats to their health care, all of these things they were experiencing, but they didn't even have someone to represent them. So this year, when we went around to talk to people, at first, people are like, "What are you doing here? Like, why are you knocking on my door?" Because no one is doing that with them. The only time that they get that type of engagement is during an election when someone wants something from them. No one is really asking them about things that they care about. So they were really confused, curious, and also appreciative. So for the majority of the conversations we're having, people want to share what they know. They want to get plugged in. People have told us, hey, it would be nice to have a town hall on the north side. We need something like that. We need to know who our candidates are. So that's the type of conversations we're having with people. That's kind of the origin of how we got started with door knocking. We're also in Houston connected to a larger network of organizing that's been trying to deepen the community in Houston. And if you live in other places, maybe this is something that y'all are used to, but I say this thinking about Philadelphia. They have a strong history and a community of organizing. They have people on the ground that just like are very organized. In Houston, it's not the same. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been changing that, especially around the pandemic. So so we're really connected to a larger network beyond our traditional like HIV service providers. And we're more involved in the community here in the Houston area. So that's just one example using Houston. There are other examples like in Philly, Colorado. We tried it in other areas too, like Dallas, but that's how we got started. And I'm happy to kind of expand if, or take any other questions.
Thank you so very much for breaking that down for everyone, Crystal, and thinking about actually the maturation of like this is not just something that y'all started this year. It's a multi-year project, multi-year and being able to engage and to engage voters in those local areas. I also want to highlight that a lot of those are also states that are purple in nature, also in thinking about them in both Colorado and Pennsylvania, while also thinking about also doing this in some of the deep red states and blue states. Matt, I see your hand.
Well, you stole one of the things I was going to say, which is I would say that don't think just the purple states are important, but every state has blue areas, and every district, all the margins matter, especially for the statewide. The other thing I wanted to put out there this deep long-term engagement that Crystal's doing, a number of electeds don't win their first time in office. They come back and they win again, or they run again. And sometimes that run again, they'll remember that you were there and your organization's issues are still there and are still present. So the engagement along the long term is still useful, even if your preferred candidate doesn't win. But as long as we are continuing to push the ideas and making sure that everyone's accountable to the fact that HIV has to be a priority.
Thank you for that,
J-
Matt. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Just to quickly add to that, just, again, the district that we engaged with, it's very strongly Democrat. And, sometimes we may feel that that's set, but the fact of the matter is we've lost a lot of champions in Congress for our issues. Barbara Lee's not in Congress anymore. Bonnie Watson Coleman is retiring at the end of this year. Jerry Nadler is retiring. And we don't just need people who will help out, which is fine, but we also need champions. And so there's something to be said about really going and educating, even if you feel that it's a district where someone who's going to be favorable to our issues generally is likely to win, still bump that up even further.
Thank you so very much, Jeremiah. Jesse, I see your hand. We also open up the space to questions for anyone. You can drop questions in the chat and or raise your hand, and we will call on you.
Yes, thank you so much, Max. And first of all, thank y'all so much, the panel, for coming today and speaking and sharing such insights. My question is to everything that was shared, from the resources to the social function that Jeremiah hosted. I was wondering, in terms of like the work as it pertains to like language justice and like the immigrant community, right? From both HIV, but also uh through voting. Um, have have any of y'all worked towards making these spaces, resources, or opportunities accessible, right? Not just to the Latino community, like to the Haitian community, to other immigrant communities that we know are either impacted by HIV and or oftentimes are assumed this monolith around that they, oh, because they're immigrant, because they don't speak English, they can't vote, forgetting that there's naturalized citizens. And even if individuals don't have quote unquote voting status, they still have mixed households like myself, that again, going back to that education piece, can still bring into someone who can vote. So I was just wanting to see what you guys did, or if not, could maybe work towards. Uh, Thank you.
I don't mind
Matt?
jumping in.
Oh, Crystal, start, then we go to Matt.
Okay, yeah. I love this question, and it made me think about a couple of things. Um we expanded the area where we were canvassing in North Philly into an area called Kensington. And if anyone knows Kensington, the city is trying to ultimately gentrify that area by criminalizing people uh, for things like uh, drug addiction and things like that. So that area is largely Puerto Rican, Spanish speaking. And this last campaign, we hired more people from the community, more people who were Spanish speaking, to make sure that we could actually reach the folks in that area. And simple things like, I say this is simple, but um, being able to translate your documents is incredibly helpful, but also hiring people from the community will always be a way to make sure you're connecting with the people from the community. Last thing I think about is what we lack as an organization. We know that someone else in our community has, another organization has. Like, I think about other organizations. One of the organizations in Houston called Bonding Against Adversity, and they have a lot of resources that we can tap into, even though we ourselves may not have it. So those are the things that I think about that we've done, but I know that there's more that can be done. And I'll pass it to Matt.
Yeah, I think what I would say is many hands make the work go better. I don't have language skills myself, but I know folks who do. So and I think that what Crystal was saying earlier about we know our communities. And so if we know our communities need those resources, some of us have to step in the breach to do that kind of translation work, but we can tell people where to go. So, like, I have friends at the National Immigrant Law Center who I rely on heavily when I need just to add immigration stuff, especially around elections. I know that the Amigos Roundtable exists, which is the large federal roundtable of immigrant advocacy groups across the whole spectrum of folks who are in immigration. So, there's a whole section of African immigrants that we generally don't talk about, but also has very high levels of HIV risk in a number of communities. Being able to reach out to them, the smaller community, you get open community, depending on where they're located. But really, as Crystal said, it comes down to knowing your people, knowing what your people need, and figuring out how to connect resources. And we can happily connect people with more resources, but we have to know where the need is.
Thank you so very much for that, Matt, and Crystal for that breakdown. And Jesse, thank you for that question. It's an important piece. And my only addition to that is partnering always does make it better and stronger. But also, as folks, and I do some door knocking in support of a C4 here in Georgia as well, is one of the things to also think about is we're trying to talk to as many voters as possible. So as long as they're registered in the system and we can do some of that follow up, that we can make sure that folks understand that even if they are in mixed status homes. And I think it is just as important. And what I've always told folks, and we do the same thing with people that are formerly incarcerated, is you may not have the access to vote, but what we can do is get you in getting others to go out to vote or to be engaging in your local electoral system in different ways. So that's also an option for folks. I want to open up for any more questions that folks have. Um, Thank you, Jesse. Again, thank you for that question. And want to allow space for any other questions that people have. Well, with that, and given our time, I do want to give each of our amazing panelists a last statement, if they would like to, something for folks to remember as they are engaging in this election year, engaging with candidates throughout this year. One lasting thought to think about, and we will start with Crystal.
Thanks, Max. I actually was thinking about Jesse's question and thinking about language justice, not only in like the translation of languages, but also in the way that we talk to one another. Um, and sometimes I know when I go back home and I get into conversations with my people from Beaumont, sometimes it's a thing, okay? So that is also language justice, talking to people in the ways that we communicate. And nobody else has to understand it, but we understand each other. Um, the thing that I think about and just closing words is there are lots of resources that exist. Um, I would encourage everyone to find themselves a political home, somewhere that they can trust to translate the world around us and build a community from there. So from your friends, your family, the people um, within our own organizations, I see PWN folks as my community too. So I encourage every one of us to find your people and take care of one another, take care of yourselves during this time. So I'll pass it to Jeremiah.
Thanks, Crystal. I'll just say, the, you know, very iconic phrase, silence equals death, has never been more valid and true. And when it comes to these conversations, we can't allow ourselves to be uh, silenced. The fact is that the people that we are having to do battle with right now, they're breaking the rules left, right, and center. Okay. We don't get to do that as easily because, we do want to keep our organizations. We have to have, well, if when we're talking in the context of our organizations, we're all trying to make sure that we don't get ourselves into more trouble. What you do on your own time in the streets, by all means, there are some great groups out there. But I will just say we can't afford to be overly quote unquote compliant. We need to be willing to push the boundaries, face our fears around that stuff, and go as far as we can within our relative, risk level that we're willing to accept. Because with them doing everything that they can and breaking all the rules, we have to get out there even harder, and do everything that we can, in order to make sure that our voices are heard. So that takes emotional work sometimes to start, a little education, and then get into action. And we're here to help people. Please feel free to reach out. We will always be happy to talk through all of that with you. And back over to Matt.
Yeah, I will just say that I think it's been a narrative that has goes, you all don't have to do all this work alone. We do all this work together. The only thing that is required is that everybody do work and that we all work hard. And so find your part in this, work hard, and you can do more. You can push boundaries because that's what we have always done as a community is pushed and reset the norms. We've got great people who will advise us on like how far you can push, but remember that we are a powerful community who's moved this world before and will continue to do so.
And with that, thank y'all so very much for all of the wisdom that y'all gave to everyone on this call and the different ways in which we have engaged in this very important election year. Remind your folks to go out and vote. As you said in Chicago, vote early, vote often. But thank y'all so very much. Don't vote too often. That you get in trouble. But vote
Vote
vote most
legally.
often. Yes.
Don't start conspiracy theories on that.
Yeah, I'm not. We'll cut that part of the. Thank y'all so very much. Y'all have a wonderful, great rest of your days, and I will see many of y'all on calls and in person in the coming weeks. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.